Welcome, everybody. My name is Keri Sansevere. I'll be with you this semester as your instructor, and I wanted to just make this very brief recording to really introduce myself to you. And let me start with, I guess, where my story of anthropology begins in my life. I actually went all the way with anthropology, and I think I liked it because it really enveloped all the things that resonated with me, even like very early on in my life. As a young kid, one of my earliest memories is actually like playing in the dirt. As I got a little bit older, I actually really liked going to museums. I loved the vibe there. I liked learning about all these old things. There was such like a mystery about it. And I was really always curious about the past, even like human evolution, where we came from. And as I got even a little bit older, I love to people watch, really just like observing people and seeing what they do, how people interact with each other. Freshman year of college, took my first anthropology class, and I was like, oh my God, I can study this in school. Well, my dad actually wanted me to major in business, but my soul really had a different path for this season in my life. So I got a bachelor's in arts, of arts and anthropology from Monmouth University, and I minored in history, archaeology and GIS too, and didn't take any time off. I just went right to grad school after that. I enrolled right in Temple University right after I graduated, and I pretty much did almost exclusively what we call historical archaeology, or the archaeology of the last 500 years or so. Pretty much did that exclusively up until I guess I was about 30 years old. So really at this time, it was like there was a knowing that this was my path, that this was my calling, to discover new information about past societies and to give people in the past, a chance to tell their story, because maybe they didn't get, that chance to tell their story during their lifetime. So really to give people a voice, people of the past a voice. Most of my field work, especially when I was kind of going through graduate school, was doing archaeology, doing field work in the Middle Atlantic and the American Northeast. My dissertation actually looked at a type of pottery that we called colonoware. It's really interesting. Colonoware is this earth-toned, coarse earthenware pottery that archaeologists generally encounter in plantation contexts, usually in the American Southeast. And we've been thinking for many decades now that it was a type of pottery that was made by Native Americans, Africans, and African American potters between the 16th and 19th centuries. I've also done some ethnographic research on the discipline of archaeology. This was also part of my dissertation. So I'm interested in archaeology as a discipline through the eyes of a cultural anthropologist, actually. Interested in questions regarding the dimension of gender in professional archaeology, things like the mechanisms that control heritage, even how bias is created in archaeological research. What's very interesting even is the politics of archaeology, all the little bits of things that happen behind the scenes. And all of these things together kind of shape how knowledge is created in the field of archaeology. So that's a little bit about my dissertation. What's kind of funny though, is that I think there actually came a point in my early 30s when I realized that my obsession with the past, that it wasn't just professional, it was actually personal. And at that point, I became very involved with doing, kind of working on healing my own personal past, taking some pretty like deep dives into what was for me uncharted territory. So it was almost as if I became this archaeologist of my own life, an archaeologist of my own life, where I was peeling back these layers, if you will, that really conditioned this young woman that I had grown into at this point. So it was all about discovering all of this information about why I operate the way I do. And also collectively, why is it that society operates the way it does, and how has that shaped me and my experience? So it was like at this point, I had this knowing of how and why down, but the next step was really to reset my nervous system. And at the time, I was teaching about shamanism a lot, actually. It's very common to like learn about this in any anthropology class. It's the oldest form of human spiritual expression. And as I was like preparing my lectures and teaching about it, I was like, wow, I think I need this. More, please. And shortly after that, I ended up apprenticing with a shaman and learned all these different healing modalities, ways to heal within. Things like how to feel my way into my soul's calling, how to open my heart, what it means to be a conscious being, even how to cultivate things like discernment, how to surrender to the current of life. And what I discovered is that, this is a kind of ancient knowing. This is knowledge that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's just really been something that's been forgotten. And then after that, it was like this light switched, and I was like, oh my God, this is literally cultural anthropology. I just spent 10 years working on this, PhD in archaeology. And it's like in my early 30s, I was having this identity crisis where I was like, I think I'm a cultural anthropologist. What do I do now? At this point, I've really come to think of myself as this anthropologist whose work really kind of does merge both archaeology and anthropology. It's kind of like the old and the new. So I'm like this hybrid anthropologist right now. I do have some current research interests. Maybe I'll just talk to you about very briefly. I've been looking into a piece about contemporary archaeology that examines like the landscape and also the materiality of a low-income apartment complex in Monmouth County, New Jersey. So stay tuned for more on that. And maybe, I sort of hinted at this other one. Another recent interest is this Western, and I'll use like air quotes, but this Western wokeness surrounding traditional and ancient healing modalities, things like ritual, things like plant medicine, and how these things can be used perhaps to alchemize, this frenetic energy overload, this overstimulation, this ungroundedness, if you will, that really has come to characterize, this Western post-colonial digital age that we all seem to find ourselves in at this very moment in time. Outside of academia, I have my hands in lots of other things too. In my free time, I enjoy running. I love yoga, strength training, meditation, breath work. I do all of it. Other hobbies, videography, photography. I like to cook, plant-based meals, really healthy things. I also write poetry when I have time, and like almost always listening to some form of music. My musical interest really runs the entire spectrum. I also practice Reiki. Reiki is a type of energy healing from the East. I've also been trained in the arts of divination and shamanic healing. So, I really just love having my hands in all of these different pots and, stirring up all this different kind of magic that, nourishes myself, nourishes my community, and nourishes the people around me.